Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Non-Obvious Beyond Diversity Summit. I'm your host, Monika Samtani, and I'm the founder of Ms. Media and the Fem Word, broadcasting stories of bold women in creative spaces. And thanks so much to our organizers, the team at Non-Obvious Company. The panel today, Just Be You, embracing our bodies and ourselves as we are. So how do we get to a place where the natural diversity of body shapes and sizes are not only accepted, but also respected and celebrated? The dynamic discussion probes the tropes, typecasts, and lies society peddles about healthy living, belonging, and body size, and how it all intersects with body image. It is my honor and great pleasure to be speaking today with Holly Ann Brooks, journalist, disability rights campaigner. Hi, Holly.
Hi.
Dr. Joy Cox, author of Fat Girls in Black Bodies. Hello, Dr. Cox.
Hello.
And Alex Taylor, award-winning writer and advertising creative with work on projects such as the Vulva Visibility Project. Hi, Alex. How are you?
Hi. Thanks so much for having me.
How cool is it to have all of you in the room today? Because when we look at the work you all are doing in such different ways, we see that not only body shape, but race, color, gender, age, disability, sexuality, the intersection of all of these plays into body image. So, Dr. Cox, let's get right to the core of the issue. There is an idealized standard of beauty that we as human beings deal with today. So in your book, Fat Girls in Black Bodies, you take us on your personal journey and you talk about that intersectionality of race and body. How did that, for you, make it even more complicated?
Well, I think that, at least within the United States, racism is somewhat known as the United States original sin. And so obviously being in a larger body and being Black and being a cisgender woman, that complicates the type of experience that you have. Narratives are written about different identities in this country. And so, if you kind of think about another narrative being laid on top of one that's already stigmatized, right? Obviously, it's going to make things harder for you. It's going to be harder for you to be heard. There's a lot of silencing that goes on. And then you have these other stereotypes, right? And so what does it mean for me if I'm not receiving proper care, if I'm not being treated properly and I raise my voice? Then you have the angry Black woman stereotype that kind of gets laid on top of fat phobia. What does it mean if I'm in a hospital and I'm looking for care, right? I'm less likely to be believed as a Black woman. People are less likely to pay attention to my pain. Just a few years ago, there were still writings in medical books that said that Black women were more tolerable of pain than other races. And so you have all of these different things that are kind of coinciding with one another. And there's a constant tension around identities and how they show up in public spaces. And so being someone who lives in a larger body and also having to deal with these other narratives that have been written about my identity and how I show up in the world was difficult. And I think that it's a hard place to navigate, but also I'm grateful for the work that has been done and that's being done to address these issues.
I mean, you make a pretty bold statement about being fat in this country. And add Black to that picture, or misogynoir. Did I say that right? It's a term that I just learned in doing my research, which means unique discrimination that Black women face. Talk to us about the misogynoir.
Well, again, I think that it kind of goes back to the narratives that are written about Black people in the United States, Black women in particular, right? And so there are a lot of things that are said about Black women as it relates to our lived experience and how we show up in the world, being fat, a lot of mammification, if you will, right? What does it mean to be a mammy? The fat Black woman that's supposed to take care of everyone except herself. Black women are expected to lay down their lives for the cause. I think we've seen this very prevalent in the election that just passed, right? And so this idea that Black people are constantly sacrificing themselves for the greater good. Black fat women often get caught in the crosshairs of that. And again, because the expectation is there, no one is checking on us. Nobody is looking to make sure that we're okay. And no one's asking us about what we desire, what it is that we want to do. We are expected to do these things. We are expected to take care of everyone else. We're expected to be the friend that everyone can lean on. We're often known as the third wheel. We're typically desexualized, right? In the public sphere. We have these extremes. Either you're desexualized or you're over-sexualized. But either way you swing it, right? Oftentimes Black fat women are looked at the ones that are desperate. We do not qualify. If you're going to pick someone to be, your mate for life, it probably stereotypically would not be a Black fat woman. We're known to be lazy, as most fat people are stereotyped as. We don't care as much about our health. And so again, this layer of race and racism, anti-Blackness that kind of gets laid on top of these narratives as it relates to fatness, Black fat women are always contending with these narratives, no matter where we go in the public. And it shows, right? And I think that, when we talk about stress, when we talk about health complications, we often don't talk about the impact of stress. We don't talk about the impact of racism as it relates to this country. And we don't talk about weight stigma and how that plays a part in the type of care that we receive. And then also how those things are impressed upon us and make us feel about ourselves. And so we know that fat people are more likely to delay care as it relates to medical care, which also takes a toll on our bodies physically. And so there are a number of different ways. I feel like it shoots us like an octopus. There's so many different arms and tentacles to the way that weight stigma and racism coincide with one another and make it hard for the lived experience for people who are living, particularly in this country. And depending on what size you are, your struggle will be multiplied, right? And so I'm what's considered a mid-size fat of sorts. I can still go to most plus size stores and find something in my size. But if we are talking about people who identify as super fat, so people who have less access to get their needs met, they typically shop online. Or if we talk about InfiniFats, those are typically the people that you see depicted on shows like My 600-Pound Life. Obviously, you're treated differently. And I don't think that is I don't think that that's a far-fetched assessment. You're typically blamed for the outcomes of your body across the spectrum.
And it's interesting, you talk about the fact that there isn't that line of communication with people like you and your experience. And yet I love that you've written this book because it's your journey and a community of stories. So I want to dig deeper into that as well. Right now, I want to go over to Holly Ann, because Holly, you dealt with a disorder that affected your ability to walk a couple of years ago. Talk to us about your experience, because being in a wheelchair was, I think, new for you, and how that experience changed for you in terms of that public perception.
Yeah, so I went from being, very busy, active, regular, and I use the term regular very loosely, woman in London going about her daily job to bam, getting ill overnight, losing my ability to walk due to a rare neurological condition, and becoming a full-time wheelchair user. I'm now kind of nearly 3 years out from that, and I'm using a wheelchair part-time. But again, the perception straight away changed, and I was completely desexualized. I was seen as somebody to feel sorry for. On the flip side, I was seen, because I am a fat woman, that it was my fault that I got this brain disorder, and that I got sepsis, and that I got meningitis. There were comments online that, if you weren't so fat, you wouldn't have got ill. And of course, that had absolutely no placement on that. But straight away, society becomes extremely closed off to you. and you have to reassess. And on one hand, you deal with it because you have no choice. When you cannot walk, when you cannot get to the bathroom without help, you've got to deal with it, because if you don't, you quite literally will die. You won't eat, you won't sleep, you won't have water, you won't be able to go to the bathroom. On the other hand, there is this very slow, and it's something I think I'll come to terms with for the rest of my life, period where you're seen as other from society, you're seen as not as good, you're seen as not intelligent, you're seen as, people are surprised that I work, people are surprised that I have a boyfriend. And this isn't just my story, this is the story of so many disabled people across the world.
And so as a campaigner for disability rights, what was the first thing that you felt you had to take on? I mean, you just mentioned so many ways that your life changed and society's perception of you changed.
One of the big things for me was public travel here in the UK. It is a minefield when it comes to disability rights, when it comes to wheelchair usage. Things are not put in place in the way that they are in places across Europe. Guidelines are quite flimsy. And that was my first experience of not being able to commute to work like I was able to a couple of months previously. So I took that on, and I guess with that whole aspect of, well, I need to get to work like normal, I need to get into London like everybody else, came with this really big concept that we're not seen as people who are on the commuter trains every day. We're not seen as people who have marriages, we're not seen as people with places to be, full stop. And that was the first thing I felt I really had to take on, because it's a cycle. The harder you make things like public transport access for us, the likely we are more to shy away, the more that it feeds into the notion that we're hidden away, when actually we have such fulfilled lives. Do not ever feel sorry for us. That was the big thing to take on. So I think it's a case of kind of trying to say, we're here, and you have to, by law or just by being decent people, make those adjustments, okay? Because I'm not, medically disabled. It's society that is the disabled aspect. Society closes off all disabled people, full stop. And it's society that needs to change its way of thinking around disability to make the world a more inclusive place.
Well said. Thank you so much. And in terms of Alex bringing men to the table, I mean, you are an amazing example with the work that you have done. You created campaigns that are certainly non-obvious in their approach. And when we talk about bringing men to the table, you created an initiative and then called it something that even many women can't say, but it's so important to understand because it relates to body positivity and sexual health. Tell us about what you're working on.
Thank you. I just thought that was so interesting. Last speaker, Holly, saying about the fact that the society has the problem, and it's not the individual who has the problem. It's such a good way to say it, because I think that, and that is what I often try to address myself. It's not about the individual that has the problem. It's society that has this this big, ugly sort of scar, and it's about trying to remedy that. And so I work in advertising. Advertising has a bit of an ugly name. It's known as sort of the Don Draper, a couple of old white guys sitting around drinking whiskey in a back room, thinking about, how do we market women's lipstick to women's bodies? And for the large part, that is what it has been for a long time, and things are starting to change. And I've completely forgotten what the question is, but that's okay.
Just how, and I love that you were speaking to what Holly Ann was saying, because she said society closes off to you. And so what you're talking about is body positivity as it relates to sexual health, because that's part of our image. That's part of how we deal with ourselves every day. Absolutely.
And so I did one project. I think the best way to talk about this would be to give you that example, the vulva visibility issue. I don't know if we have this kind of, this idea seems to ring very true with the women that we speak to in doing the research for this project. And all of the guys we speak to just say the same thing, which is just like this kind of, they say it with their eyes. It's kind of a look of shock. They just don't quite understand. And it's this idea that most women don't see their own vulvas until a very late stage on in their development. My girlfriend and partner, Alicia Radia, another brilliant creative, said she didn't see hers until she was 18. And it was, looking into a makeup mirror, just one of those little clamshell kind of things.
And Teen Vogue did a collab with you and The Case for Her, which addresses women's health issues, and you put a mirror in Teen Vogue's magazine.
Yeah, we put a mirror in the magazine. So we thought all of these pages have sort of holes in them, shaped in this kind of eyelash kind of shape, or an eye shape, I should probably say. So this mirror was kind of at the back of this magazine. So it's the entire way through, you'd be flicking through and you'd see this mirror. And the idea was basically to actually use the mirror to help women to see their own vaginas and vulvas, and actually sort of do a kind of a guide through it that isn't invasive, that isn't this a shoddy introduction that you have to give yourself with a compact mirror. This is
look, in the end, it's easier for a guy to see what's down there than
unbelievably easier. It's been swinging around for ages. Oh my God. Yeah, you can't believe how easy. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't stretch out very far, but it certainly is there. And yeah, since the age of 12, I've been able to use it for its sexual function. So girls don't have that opportunity, either through the barriers of the actual anatomy. I mean, it's an incredibly awkward angle to get down there, but also this kind of barrier that we put on in society to say that it's almost shameful for women to sexually explore themselves.
Let's take those two aspects. Video, actually, because I want to bring everyone else into the conversation once they've seen it.
If you ask a guy about the first time he ever saw his penis, he'd look at you funny. But if you ask a woman about the first time she ever saw her vulva, she might be able to tell you. She'll likely tell you a story involving awkward mirror acrobatics or the unflattering lens of a camera phone. It'll also probably involve confusion, nervousness, and sometimes shame. Gynecologists report that some 30% of women have never seen their own vulvas, and no wonder there's an orgasm gap. And lesson one in knowing what gets you off is knowing what you're working with. To do that, we'll need to get hands-on. So, Teen Vogue will print its first physical mag in 2.5 years. This is the Vulva Visibility issue. This issue of our magazine will be centred around a big, beautiful, clear mirror. So unlike most mirrors, you can lay it flat on the floor or prop it up and squat over it for a clear view, leaving your hands free to wander. The magazine and the mirror will take your eyes and fingers on a guided tour of each part of your vulva, from labia majora to minora and everything in between. We'll give you the down low on each bit and make sure you know what's normal for you and what isn't. We'll feature the stories of prominent vulva owners describing the first times they explored what's between their legs in the magazine and on social media. And we'll make sure you know about the issue with our bold mirrored posters and stickers. In the end, it'll be like you've known your vulva your entire life, without a papaya or orchid in sight.
Question. So many just amazing, great things about this campaign. Let's bring everybody on because I want to get your reactions. And my first question would be, Alex, how did you decide to name this? And did you face any resistance once this campaign premiered?
Not a lot of resistance, really. It was more just sort of surprise from men, just being kind of, we don't know about this. It's kind of this mystical, magical world of female sexuality, and we don't know about these kind of struggles and problems that women have. So it's not something that we're familiar with. So when someone says it out loud, it's kind of shocking, and it kind of it really makes you think. And I think that's what we just tried to get across with the campaign ultimately. Just trying to obviously provide something that for women, but absolutely for women, but also just kind of drag men into the conversation and say, look at these things. These are interesting, and it's kind of fascinating too.
Yeah. Dr. Cox, any thoughts?
So we don't have things like this in the United States. So one, I think that the campaign is super cool in that regard.
Thank you.
I think one of the things that I thought about, though, as I'm watching the thing, I'm thinking about accessibility, right? Like, if I'm a larger size, how do I get in that mirror? Like, that was my first, like, how do I get in the mirror, right? How am I positioning my body so that I can see, like, my mechanics and things of that nature? And so definitely awesome to see like campaigns like this rolling out, and kind of just building off of like, the ideas or the stereotypes that like fat women don't get pleasure. We don't, any of those things. And so it's definitely interesting to see. And, I hope that people really took advantage of it. And, we do need to know our bodies more, and the world in some ways needs to know about our bodies more. And so kudos to Alex. I think that campaign.
Yeah, I mean, it's a conversation starter for sure.
For sure.
And number one. Number two, you really hit the nail on the head, Joy, because I haven't seen anything like that here. And nor I am married to a gentleman from London. So I watched ads, growing up while I was dating him, and we never have had anything like you have over there. We need to bring more here. Literally open up that conversation and be bold about it.
It's fascinating because Holly, you're from the UK, you can probably back me up too. Is this that we kind of look at America from afar, and we tend to think of each other as quite alike, because I think your media with Hollywood is quite a liberal sort of circle, but there's this huge conservative base in the US that we don't really see, or at least Holly and I don't really get to see in the we see it in the media recently, but we saw them all go into the White House, but we don't really see them sort of amplified as voices a lot. So it's fascinating to us that you can't even swear on your radio, and it seems such a little thing, but you do need that sort of provocation to happen, and that's where the ideas come through, and change starts to happen, I think.
Yeah. But I think as well in the UK, I think we have a very, especially if I imagine Alex, you're around my age, and we have this very sexualized thing growing up where we had page 3 girls. So this is women in a very popular right-wing newspaper who would just not have any clothes on bar a pair of small pants. And we would see that, and that would often be our first introduction, male and female, to kind of female anatomy. And I don't know what Alex's schooling was like, but my sex education was non-existent. Back then I was able-bodied, now I'm disabled. And disability and sex education is a whole different ballgame. But we still, don't have a lot of that labeling. It should be called a vulva, it should be called a vagina. We shouldn't use these very twee words around it, which I think is still quite prevalent, but I do hope is changing.
Yeah.
We had, I don't know about you, Dr. Cox, but sex education for us was like 5th grade.
Right.
We all giggled about it and couldn't believe what we were seeing, and then went about our day.
Right. We haven't evolved from those tween words either, right? Like nobody calls it a vulva. Nobody, right? Everything else but that, right? Right. We can't even here in the States, there isn't like that clear identification of a woman's anatomy and what those body parts look like. And it's fascinating in some ways, but also sad. We should be past this point by now. And even to Alex's point about how there's not swear words that are allowed, like on the radio and different things like that. there tends to be a notion that like if you can't see it, it's not happening, right? But
100%.
that's, you know, that suppression that takes place definitely happens like underground, right? People are finding ways to get access and information on these things, but it would just be so much easier if people would just be honest and say, yes, this stuff is happening. Yes, like, you know, this is a woman's body. This is what it looks like. Because then there wouldn't be that shame and there wouldn't be that suppression.
Right. And then Holly Ann, I mean, you talk about being disabled and that perception that disabled people can't have sex. I mean,
and, oh my God, we do. We have so much. It's great.
Because disabled people have sex too.
All the time. And it's amazing. And we have great health sex lives. And we should have access to sex education. When I came out of hospital, I had been with my boyfriend 6 months at the honeymoon period, you know, any chance we could get before I got sick. And then it was like, okay, I can't move my legs. What on earth do I do now? And that information isn't really out there. It's you have to really pull it out from underground places, you know, underground online communities. And I think I've been very lucky that my role as a journalist has allowed me to write about the best sex toys for disabled people, for example, for Cosmopolitan, who is a huge platform, because we need to acknowledge that we are sexualized people. And yeah, okay, we might not, because of our physical disabilities, be able to use the average sex toy, or we might not be able to get into certain positions. But again, it's all about everything else adapting. We're not the ones kind of wrong because we are disabled. It's about having fun and figuring out which way to go. And I had no idea about any of this 2.5 years ago. And I've had to figure it out. And at times it's been exciting as to see what works. And at times it's been really demoralizing because I don't see really women like me who are wheelchair users who were, you know, being pro-sex.
And so I got one actionable item already, which is society needs to open up.
Yeah, it does. And don't be ashamed to figure out, like, masturbation really helped me figure out who I was as a disabled person, full stop, let alone as a sexual woman. So the first kind of 6 to 8 weeks or so after I initially got sick, that was how I explored my own body. And I think that's great advice for anyone of any ability, of any, you know, race, of any gender, is to figure out what works for you and your touch and what you enjoy, so that you can then go and tell the person or the people you're with what feels good, what feels right, and where to go.
That's such a good point. And I feel like it was something that Dr. Cox was saying earlier, which really resonated with me, which was this idea of if just sweeping it under the rug and pretending it doesn't happen doesn't alleviate any of that happening. It still happens. Everyone is going to explore their body. Everyone is going to masturbate. Everyone is going to find out what's going on down there and experience sex for themselves. And by not talking about it, you aren't stopping it happening. You're just making it really, really awkward. And the conversation becomes so difficult to have when we keep sweeping it under the rug. So the more we talk about it and the more that great information is out there and available, the better sex we'll have, the better masturbation we'll have, the better conversations we will have about improving it, and sexual health will just be so much more digestible in the mainstream conversation. So I just thought that was a fantastic thing to say.
We are in a constantly connected culture, right? And so therefore, as we know, social media enhances the psychological effects, both negative but also positive, because I'm trying to see, is liberation possible today? There was a study done at King University in England that found that social media can positively impact body image in a number of ways. So I want you all to take a look at this magazine cover that we just found actually yesterday. It's Athleta, the brand. This is the February 2021 issue, and it's part of the Power of She campaign. So from this, we're seeing more body image advocacy on the internet and in print with brands such as this cover. Do you think, looking at that, what's your reaction? Is this helping with boosting self-esteem?
Yeah, I mean, as long as we see more people who look like us, that can only be a good thing. We're not in the age, particularly, you know, like I mentioned, page 3 earlier in Britain, where we have a certain look, a certain thing that is sexualized in the US and obviously globally. We see the Kardashians, and that's the prime idea of beauty right now. And I think what that can do is damaging as well, because I think the more we see things like that, the more it can feel for the people who go, well, actually, I fancy, you know, men with loads of hair on their chest, and that's not what's in vogue right now, and am I normal? But on the flip side, the more again that we see that variant, and yeah, I do like men with hairy chests, then you know, the more we see that, then the better it is, the more offering that is out there, because there are billions of us in the world and we all look different.
And certainly we're seeing more advocates, not only with Athleta, but influencers on social media, Dr. Cox.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that inclusion matters. I think people seeing themselves represented in a number of different contexts help them to feel like they belong, help them to feel seen. And so looking at covers like that, you know, definitely a big deal. I think Cosmopolitan UK came out with something that was very similar to that at the beginning of this year. I think the cover for February shows like what health is, and it shows different individuals who are on the cover or within the magazine, in the book, different body sizes, body diversity, different abilities. And I think, you know, even outside of that context, right? So outside of the context of health, what does it look like to have, you know, people who have disabilities, kind of like what Holly is talking about, right? In romantic relationships, fat people in romantic relationships, fat people being CEOs, all of those things. I think the more that we see ourselves represented in society, the more we feel like we belong in society. And, you know, the more that people who may not be a part of our groups see us as belonging in society. And I think that, again, kind of going back to Holly's point, that's the important part, because it's society that puts up these barriers that of non-acceptance, not so much that we can't do the jobs or that we're not, you know, we're not qualified, we're not healthy, you know, all of those things. But if society writes these narratives about us, and this is what the majority runs with, this is what you're more likely to see be reproduced in public spaces, and we want to change that.
Alex, thoughts?
Yeah, that's exactly, I think, what my industry's for, isn't it? It's about taking those images and getting them out there. And, you know, as I said, you know, 10 years ago, if you look at the advertising for Levi jeans, you'd see these pencil thin women with, you know, basically no flesh on them, and you're just thinking, how is this possibly a realistic standard? What am I even looking at? And now things are starting to change, but you know, it's slow progress. And you still, of course, you have, I don't know if the US is familiar with Piers Morgan. He's the bane of British journalism, but he will frequently appear and give counterpoints to all of these arguments that, you know, we're putting forward here today, and that it does get picked up in the mainstream. And unfortunately, there is a lot of, you know, backlash to showing different body types. But it's strange, isn't it, that we've reached a point where you are experiencing a backlash to what is realistic. It shows how far we've gone down the rabbit hole there.
Yeah. I mean, it takes a really long time for things to change. It's crazy to me, because when I was young, I saw those pencil thin people, you know, in advertisements, and I still see them today. Although, yes, social media is changing things. And one thing I want to point out, Dr. Cox, Joy, is one of the chapters in your book is titled Acceptance plus Resistance equals Activism. And another quote from you is that's so powerful to me is, there isn't one thing in this world that Black fat women have not done, not one. And then you also talk about diet culture. So talking about actionable items and that title of that chapter, tell us what that means.
Well, I think, you know, for people who have identities that are stigmatized, the first part of accepting yourself kind of puts you at a defense, right, of what is typically accepted. And so if you learn how to use that strategically, I think you find yourself in a space of activism where you're not only just speaking for yourself and fighting for yourself, but you also find yourself in a place where you're fighting for others. And that's really what that means. And so looking at these things, you know, as someone who has accepted themselves with identities that are typically stigmatized in society, and now, you know, strategically, I found a way to kind of share my thoughts. This becomes a form of activism. This becomes a form of, you know, behavior that can be utilized to empower other people who also have stigmatized identities in hopes that they find their footing in their space, in their voice, to be able to speak out. Monika, I think you said something a little bit earlier about, you know, change being slow. And, you know, at least in the United States, what I think, you know, what we've experienced for the past 4 years as it relates to the Trump presidency, what I was able to maybe see a little bit more is that change doesn't happen as slow when people who are in power kind of facilitate that change. I think part of the reason why change is happening so slow here is that because the people who don't have as much power are the ones that are using all their energy to share the information, right? This activism that's being used in hopes that people in power will then catch on to it. And so, you know, the hope is that, you know, the more that we position ourselves and the more that individuals who are in power position themselves and gather this sense of acceptance, right? So you don't have to necessarily live in a fat body or live with a marginalized identity to practice acceptance. You can stand in solidarity with individuals. You can be an ally. You can, you know, practice acceptance of who we are and who our identities are, and then strategically place your work. Right? Find your lane. For some people, it may be advertising. For other people, it may be writing, speaking out, poetry. It may be you funneling finances towards a thing. But doing those two things equate to activism. And through activism, that's when we see change.
And in Holly Ann, in the December 2020 Guardian newspaper article, you said that you realized your inner monologue was putting way too much pressure on yourself, and that you would berate yourself for not being further along in your career, not being as financially secure as you'd like, or not meeting a whole host of other self-assigned goals. Talk to us about the action that you took to change that mindset.
I think initially the whole thing of just being, you know, a 31-year-old woman, full stop. You have that pressure of career, of having it all, you know, of marriage, of children, of being a certain way. So I would look at people I went to university with, and I go, oh, now they've got their own advertising agencies, or they're working, you know, as CEOs, and I'm here, and I used to be that, and I used to be that, and now I'm at home and I'm writing in my loungewear all the time. And there would be things like, it just felt like time had stood still, and it had to an extent. I had to rest and recuperate, because that was where my body and my brain needed to be. But at the same time, it's so important to actually look back very positively and say, I did this, this, and this, and also know that for me, a big learning curve was that my career wasn't the thing that defined me. That was what my focus had been on for at least 10 years before I got sick. And kind of not having that office job and not having the word lead or manager in my job title, because I was now a freelance journalist who was, you know, I'm working kind of roughly about an hour a week. It's because that's how my illness needs it to be, was really tough, because I felt like I'd lost a sense of my identity. But I think it's so important we realign our identity to key traits. So while ambition may not be the highest thing for me right now, kindness to both myself and those around me and my community is, and love, maintaining, you know, a really beautiful, healthy relationship is so important to me. And the outdoors, that's something that kind of became a really important thing for me, whether I've been out in my wheelchair or more recently as I've learned to walk again, having that time outdoors and just being around nature has really, really helped. So it's about not looking at what you used to be and who you used to be, and knowing that you're the same person continuously through life. You have the same heart, you ideally have the same good intentions and the same kind of good values, and those are the things that stick with you forever. And whether you are earning, you know, £100,000 a year or you're not earning a penny, that isn't what it's all about. As long as you've got the help that you need to get by, you have it within yourself to empower yourself and so many other people.
Beautiful words. And Alex, you know, I think where I would like to see, you know, you talk about those actionable items is that we don't want to perpetuate the trope that this is just a female issue.
We wouldn't. It's certainly true to say that issues of body image do affect women a lot more than men at the moment. There is research that says that. I don't have the research to me, but you know, I think through years and years of stigma, it does absolutely affect women more. But having men in the conversation is very important. I think one of the golden rules of advertising is about creating change, and by change we mean we're not just selling an idea to people who already buy that idea. It's great talking in an echo chamber where everyone sort of has your view, and it's nice, it's comforting. But if we want change to happen, we need to start speaking to people who don't share that view. And unfortunately, a lot of men don't share the same views of body image that a lot of us do. And bringing them into the conversation is going to be very challenging because a lot of them are not interested. A lot of them share very problematic views, but doing it is worthwhile because that's where the change starts to happen. I wouldn't want to say that all men are bad or all men need to be brought into the conversation, but certainly it's a good place to start.
All of you are doing such powerful things leading toward action and changing people's perceptions and changing the way they see themselves. And as you know, this is a conference that's dedicated to providing actionable advice to the audience about how to create a more inclusive world. So just sort of the notes that I took from all of you, and I will take as I, you know, carry on in my life and my day-to-day activities: stand in solidarity with individuals and take action, reinforce those positive affirmations, kindness toward yourself and your community, get outdoors. Thank you so much for that, Holly. And creating change through advertising by sharing with people who don't necessarily share your point of view. Such great takeaways. Thank you so much. You know, one of my favorite people in the world said to me recently, "Our body is power." That was Kate Roberts that I was speaking to. Our body is power. Thank you so much, Holly Ann Brooks, Dr. Joy Cox, and Alex Taylor, for this really wonderful conversation. I could talk to you all day.
Thank you so much
for having us.
You've been watching Just Be You, embracing our bodies and ourselves as we are. This has been part of the Non-Obvious Diversity Summit. And thank you so much for watching. Check out all of the other topics we are covering because we brought together voices from all genres, genders, and geographies. For more fascinating conversations like this, visit nonobviousdiversity.com. Our summit hashtag is #NonObviousDiversity. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Monika Samtani, and remember to always stay non-obvious.